Hello, thank you for being here. We have something really, I think you're going to find really interesting and really exciting to share. We want to talk about very specific aspects of how to tell stories and some things that we have, as far as we know, we're the first, this is a first in the world that you're seeing right here. And today, if you were at the keynote, Marco said something very important. He said that people do not remember data, they remember stories. Why is that? Because stories give us a relationship between ourselves and that data. And when we get that relationship, it triggers parts of the brain and we remember what that is and we gain comprehension and understanding. So what we wanted to do between the two of us was take the most difficult aspect of storytelling, and that is, how do you tell a process? It's one thing to tell a story by entertainment, develop characters, tell a movie. That's been going on for a long time. It's another thing now in VR and in AR and XR to be able to tell stories about processes you do at work, where you put your hands on a piece of equipment. It's another thing to tell a story about a process that's mental. If you think about trying to step through processes where your hands are not on it and you have to comprehend, that is the most difficult story to tell. So we decided to start with that.
I will start by telling you guys what Catchwind is. 9 out of 10 startups fail not because their idea is bad, but because they don't know what they don't know. So Catchwind outlines in the medical device and healthcare industry, from idea to commercialization, the step-by-step process that an entrepreneur or a startup is going to have to go through to get to commercialization. We integrate two sides to that in that process. We have our navigator side, which is prototyping, design, manufacturing, sterilization, packaging, distribution, legal, anything that you could possibly imagine. We partner with those companies, and they give us the data as to when do you start engaging with a startup, what are the costs associated with that, what is the geographic location, so we can input those companies and those resources into that process at the right time. We do the exact same thing from the investor side. How much do you invest? When do you invest? What technology do you invest in? Integrate that. So what we've done is this democratization, or almost level the playing field, with the overall goal that anybody with the best idea anywhere in the world can plug into a system and get to market. Took me almost 4 years to tell you that story. Back in 2014, I had recognized that we did not make medical devices for children. We makeshifted all of our adult devices to fit them because their market wasn't seen as profitable. So children actually get secondhand healthcare because there's no money in it. So I had an idea. A pediatric refundable tax credit bill, posted the idea on LinkedIn June 5th of 2014. Within 3 months, I'm drafting 3 pediatric tax credit bills at the Capitol, and I'm diagramming late at night, how do I solve this problem? And back then, everyone thought I was crazy. I said, well, this is the process, right? Here's the idea, and here's all the problems you're gonna encounter, and here's the solution. And everyone still thought I was crazy. But over time, we looked at the process, we refined it, what was the messaging, and we ended up with what we have today. Now, with that being said, I can give somebody this linear form of steps 1 through 200 and say, follow these steps. I can give you a path, and I could show you a path and show you how those integrate in that path. But unfortunately, you don't do step 1, 2, 3, 4, especially when you're starting a company. So then, Jonathan and I met, which is another story, because someone that I was introduced to, who introduced me to someone else, who introduced me to someone else, who then I jumped on a plane to Austin from Minneapolis the next morning, and then I was introduced to Jonathan. So it was definitely a great story. And as I was telling my story about the process, he was telling me about his technology, and we said, oh my gosh, I think we can make something happen.
So, a little bit about technology that we do, and it causes you to think in a different way. In VR especially, but we'll say XR, any three-dimensional interface, just like they said this morning, it's spatial. It's far more than even Ori said. A spatial aspect means if you want it natural, how are you going to represent forces? How are you going to represent momentum, gravity, acceleration? How are you going to represent thermodynamics, quantum physics, everything that really happens, and we just accept it because it's part of life? What we do is we fundamentally change the human action by using a new interaction. We use the motion instead of clicks and buttons. We basically get rid of the mouse mentality. Instead of trying to get to an object, we look at the path of motion towards that object. This is how it works in the real world. As we begin to move, we already know where you're going to go because we can look at the direction, the speed, the acceleration, the motion profiles. We don't need to know anything about you because the human body works the same way with the brain. And as you move, you give away all the clues about what your user intent is. We can work with touch, voice, and gestures. Those are all existing today. But in every one of these, something happens after you do something. In VR experiences, when you click a button, something happens. But our brain says, that's not real. I don't click a button and move a steering wheel. I don't click a button and drink a glass of water. With dynamic motion, things happen while you're interacting. So while we begin to interact in the virtual world, when things really happen and those things respond in real time, our brain says, that may be real. Don't reject it. So in essence, what we do is we look at the shape of motion, and then we look at the motion inside of that shape. And by doing that with just changes of direction and other direction profiles and velocity and acceleration profiles, we can control scrolling, selection, attribute, and activation controls simultaneously. No other interface in the world can do that. Let's talk about the brain, and then we'll get into how this really works. So in the brain, there's a part called the entorhinal cortex. The entorhinal cortex is the gateway to the hippocampus. The hippocampus is where our memories are stored. When we go in a VR environment, and this is all XR, but VR is the most exciting one in this area. When we immerse ourselves inside that VR headset, we begin to think, is this real or not? Because we don't have the real world to compare it to. Immediately, the optical nerves start to send signals into our hippocampus and our middle brain. The frontal lobe is where we think. When I look at a sentence and I use my reticle, my pinpoint, and then I use my foveated view, I'm using a multi-processing hard. That's when the brain hurts, and it really does hurt. You go, oh, it works. Everything else is middle brain. That's our peripheral vision, fight or flight. It's how we know things intuitively. The entorhinal cortex is what gives us a spatial relationship, not only in 3D space, because I can ask you all, how many primary exits are there in this room? And you'll probably give me the right answer. There's one main one and there's two others. How many chairs? You probably won't know. Our brain maps so we can be safe and leave, and it gives us a relationship. It does the same thing with people. It does the same thing with data. It literally correlates relationships between data. When we tell a story, it's using the entorhinal cortex, it goes to the hippocampus, and we remember that story. So this is what we do. We brought together
yes.
a process, and we use these techniques inside of VR. And in here, there are no buttons. The idea is, the ship's name is Big Idea. These are the processes. As you move through these processes, they interact without buttons in real time. Head gaze causes other events to occur, and you see the relationship between the processes. There's sub-processes. The head gaze looked at operating agreement, and it brings up another set of data. The horizon is during the daytime when we look at the nighttime sky. As we move up, it transitions, and it graphically shows us the relationship between the companies and the processes.
And the slide that I showed, that was shown earlier with the process about the steps and the connections, it's the exact same thing, but it's in a way that you're going to remember and have that memory of the relationship. You know, you're going to remember, where was that prototyping sitting? If you think back after watching the video, most people are able to say, well, I remember this, I remember where it was. But if I just hand you a map and I hand you a process, you're not going to necessarily make all of those connections, all the arrows and all the relationships. So now we're able to provide people with the ability to start a company, have an idea, and they're going to know exactly what they should be doing.
And they will remember it in any order. In fact, this is the one situation that when you put on the VR, it is a different world than what you just saw flat. It strikes your brain in a different way. People come out of it, and we've literally had people cry and say, why? Because I've never understood so beautifully before. This is what's really going on. We make the interaction real. And this is design basics. How do you make it real? New technology allows you to say, get rid of the buttons, get rid of the clicks, get rid of the pushes. Because when I just, and this is using controllers in a Vive, when I just reach, and as I reach, it begins to interact, that is a field-based interaction. It's how things work in real life. The second thing is make the content intelligent. How do you do that? There's only one way you can. And that is by using the vector of that motion, predicting where the user is going, and as it happens, cause the objects to interact in real time. When that happens, our brain says, that's not a stick. That's a living thing. I must pay more attention to it. Subconsciously, it goes to the highest level for protection. And then use gaze and body. And what happens is, as you use gaze with the head, or eyes and head, and body, and then you show graphically the relationship, it puts it at the highest object retention of all. That's the main point that we want to tell you all. This is totally new. And the effects of this have been really amazing. So in essence, what happens is, the outcome is, we have us, that's the origin of our thinking. We graphically and interactively show the relationship in a dynamic way in real time with content that is intelligent. And the result is you get the maximum comprehension and retention.
And I think, even more of an outcome is I've been immersed in this for 4 years and, understanding these processes and the passing it to market. But until I actually went into VR for the first time with my own processes within my own company and the way that I provide, it actually gave me a different outcome or a different view on how I strategize. How do I move my company forward? How do I make those connections and those relationships, easier and better to understand? So it wasn't even just me going in and understanding my entire business. It allowed me to go in and strategize better, right? So you think of the future of how do you move forward in life? How do you strategize your future? How do you strategize in a process? How do you make process improvements within your company? Going into a world of VR in process allows you to think in ways that you've never been able to think before. And the experiences have been amazing. Actually, my president's sitting right there, so he knows all about our meetings. But we've gone to meetings where we're trying to tell people what we do, and over the last 4 years, we've said, okay, this is how we've changed that. But then we showed that, and it was like, I got it, right? They knew they were in the sky. They may be a law firm. I could show them on a piece of paper, but they're not going to understand in relation to that process, where do I fit in? And showing that video versus showing them, handing them a packet of here's the information to join our company. I showed them a video and they understood exactly where they fit. So it's been a great even tool for us to use. The people that experienced it, like he had said, people, it's a beautiful experience. I mean, the video doesn't do it justice, but it allowed them to see a process that is actually very complex and see it very simply.
Yeah, we had, about 3 months ago, we began showing this. And as we showed it, when people got out, because there's no buttons, and this was a seated experience, so it's safer. We don't want them to fall down, hurt themselves in VR. There's a lot of just real business risks you take. When they got out of their chair, they would step out and move sideways because they thought the controller was still in front of them, even after the headset was off. And afterwards, I would say, exactly where is that? And they would point exactly with the exact distance that it was, tell me what the processes were in any order I wanted them to know, and tell me what companies were related to that. And understand, first of all, the Golden Arches was the first milestone. That's what that represented.
It was the funding.
Yeah.
Investment.
And then we just had some recall. There was a DOD person and 2 other people, one in the medical field, one in the nonprofit human trafficking field. Every one of them that I've asked said, I can remember it today exactly as when I took the headset off, just as graphically. It's the most real experience I've ever had. So these are the things we wanted to share with you. This is what creates the future of storytelling at a level that nobody's ever known before, because we've had VR technology. We've had that 30 years, 50 years when it started off. Our IP is based around the use of motion to control things. By combining these for the first time and telling a story, we have begun to learn things and worked with neurologists and psychologists, with AT&T and other organizations to find out what's really going on with the head, because people keep giving us the exact same feedback. Every single person has given us the same thing. So we wanted to share those with you today.
Thanks, guys.
Any questions?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Other questions?
We have used it in, I'll say we've used it in biopharma, is the closest we've come to that, in a process using machinery and processes inside of it. And we were compared with every other company. It was I'll just say it was a very large German biopharma company. And they chose us over everybody else because when you use these, the amazing thing is it works the same in VR as it does when I touch on a screen or when I use a mouse cursor. There's no more clicks and buttons. So it's the same across all their devices. And we can build things about 5 times faster than anybody else in the world because we start with a different platform.
And any process can be put into this, right? If you think about anything that you do every day, right? What you know, how you get up, how you teach your children, how, you know, what you do at work, any process can be put into this type of technology. So that's kind of the future of where we think we're going. So, and it's industry agnostic.
Hello. Have you used the technology in education? So I'm an art professor. I always try to teach my students art history. And as you all know, art history, we have a long list of artists' name, year, information to remember. So one thing that's mentioned in your presentation is memorization. So that's definitely key to education. So my question to you is, have you thought about education field?
I mean, in general, we're educating young entrepreneurs, right? So I get lots of 18, 19-year-old first-time entrepreneurs that come and they need to be educated about everything, right? But they already think they have been, right? So that's the first step that we have to get over. But we educate every day with people who are first-time entrepreneurs to people who have done it multiple times in their career or had successful exits. But it does go all the way down to the level of, you know, teaching art. And I think that is the future. It's the future of training. When it comes to healthcare, we're not there yet because of, you know, just the slow traction we've gained in VR, but obviously with the other hardware costs, we will get there, but education and training is one of the main focuses that, you know, Jonathan's company has even worked on, and we educate every day.
Yeah, we'd love to do that because that's telling us, when you tell a story and you tell it with time, that was a timeline using a sand dial. There's a lot of things we didn't have the time to go into that subliminally the brain goes, I get it, without thinking about it.